If there's anybody else who's desperately adding to so we're going to go through each of the different, each of the three. My brain just shut down. Each of the three principles. Thank you. And then each of us up here are going to discuss it. So we'll do the first principle. We'll have a little discussion up here, and then I'll open it to the floor, and then we'll move to the second principle, and we'll see how we go. We'll try and do sort of 15 to 20 minutes per principle. And if we run out of time, then we'll throw some other random ones in. And maybe sing some Charlie McGee. The other really good teacher, if you want to learn the 12 principles, is to look up on YouTube for Charlie McGee's Formidable Sound System. He sings the 12 principles. So it's a great way to learn. Great for kids, great for adults. I was going to sing one to you, but I haven't learned them properly, so I won't be doing that. Sorry. Okay, so I'll start by getting everyone to introduce themselves. I'm sure most people probably know everybody, but you may not have seen their garden. So if you could just introduce yourself and say a few words about your garden.
I'm Stephanie Robertson. I've been doing permaculture for about 10 years now, and I started off with Permie Panel course, which changed my life, and I went from a garden that was basically weeds and weed trees to a permaculture garden, and it's largish. It's sort of perfectly positioned from the point of view of aspect and so on. It's now got, I think my garden's probably a fairly standard permaculture garden, but I think the point of difference is that I do have a very nice edible rainforest, I think. And everything that I put in was actually my zone 5, which is the wildlife zone for permaculture. And it is for the wildlife, but they're more interested in my other zone. Yeah, so it's an ongoing thing, and it gives me a great lot of pleasure. So, yeah.
Hello, I am Margaret Wosakowska, and my garden is very much the same size as yours, which means large, pretty large, and it's also steep. So anything that goes into the garden is to go uphill, and the difference in levels is between the street and the back fence is 11 meters. So yeah, it is pretty steep. But the most important thing for me is to produce a lot of food and to create environment for wildlife, for insects, so they do a lot of work for me. And when it comes to my permaculture journey, well, I was brought up in a tradition of tending to gardens organically, using animal manures, not using spray. So I actually practiced a lot of permaculture before I realized, oh, there is such a thing. So I think around 10 years ago, I think it was the end of 2010 or
11, maybe?
No, 2010.
Was it?
2010. I stumbled upon an open garden, and I went to, it was, I think, Diana's Fletcher garden, and then Overton. So I saw the gardens, I heard about permaculture, started coming to meetings. So permaculture sort of helped me to organize the things I already knew into a cohesive system. So I know more, the more you know, the more you learn. And then you can spot a lot of design problems which you can fix. So it's a very useful design system for me. And even if I started the garden sort of before I joined permaculture, since then I really developed it as a very productive garden. I've got about 30 fruit trees, and I've got 11 raised beds with veggies, because you can't really grow things on a slope because the soil will be washed down with the first rain. So I put garden beds in place. Yeah, so you can visit my garden this weekend. It will be open to the public.
Right, my name is Mike Hughes. I've been into permaculture for about 5 years now. We moved into our house in 2012, and for the first 3 years, I was just renovating the, well, for the first 7 years, of probably renovating the house. And so it's only the last 2 years I've really got into the garden. So my garden is these two gardens in training. I'm busy building food forests and yeah, getting, my fruit trees are only 6 months old, most of them. So, but it's coming along a treat with all the rain we've had this year. And I agree with Margaret in that permaculture has helped me. My block is large again, but rock shelves, and we're on the edge of the sandstone plateau. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And permaculture has helped me tie all the knots together to make a cohesive garden that actually works, instead of all these levels being their own separate area. That's great.
And it's a nice garden.
It's working a treat, it's all really good.
I'm Selena Cheng. I've been interested in permaculture for about 23 years or so. I only actually had a garden to actually work with in the last 6 years. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've realized that permaculture extends beyond the garden. Permaculture was always presented to me as a gardening solution. You needed to have a yard or garden or something that you could actually grow things in. And in the last couple of years, it's sort of come to various people have elaborated on the idea that permaculture is a way to live life, a set of design principles for life and not just a garden design. The garden design is certainly a major aspect of it, but it's not, doesn't have to be the only one, or you don't need to have a garden to be able to enact permaculture principles. So my own garden is about 5 or 6 years old. It's, I want to say it's small, but it's not. It's just, there's a concentrated section that's probably only about 50 square meters. And then there's like lots of other bits that are scattered around the area. But probably the thing that I am most notable for is having chickens in my front yard, where a whole bunch of people in the neighborhood can walk their dogs past. Which can sometimes be interesting when the young excited dogs are like, oh my gosh, things to chase. Luckily, we've got some very good wire fences for that. And yeah, apparently my chicken tunnels are famous.
Okay, I think I forgot, sorry. You can
No, that's fine.
I forgot to introduce myself. I think everyone knows me anyway. I'm Kat Dory. I have a rental garden, so I try and do some permaculture stuff, what I can get away with, but I know that can be reversed if need be. So no big structures or anything, but I am slowly but surely sneaking more and more things in that weren't there before. And then slowly but surely a big forest of weeds are coming over the back fence from a neighbouring property. So I'm going to just a quick advert, Permie at the end of the month to help me fight back the forest. So the first principle we are looking at today is observe and interact. So this is about taking the time to engage with nature so that we can design solutions that suit our particular situation. And that situation could be garden, home, life, your community. So we're going to start with each panel. So we'll start at that end this time. Start with so can you give us an example of how you observed and interacted with your garden, and something that might be unique to your garden, or that you were particularly enchanted by when you started to observe and interact?
To be honest, when I first got the garden, I just started. I didn't actually observe and interact, and this is actually a big problem now, because my the most intense part of my garden is actually in the southeast part, where the eastern side is actually covered by a 2-story brick, the neighbouring house, which is 2-story in brick and basically blocks all the sun. So my garden is really productive in summer, and then in winter it gets almost no sun at all. So this is an issue. So yeah, definitely I did not observe and interact. I've learned since then to take a bit more time to think about the patterns that are being formed around my garden. Probably the main thing that I would talk about is the chicken tunnels, which my garden is, like I said, fairly small. I have garden beds that are stationed around the edges of the garden. In between them are trees, so fruit trees. It's a fairly intensely planted area, and the purpose of it was to more or less develop something like Linda Woodrow's Permaculture Kitchen Garden in a way that worked for my own context. The difficulty was that I had the chickens lived in a house in one corner of the property, one corner of the yard, and then the garden beds were all across the rest of the yard. So I had to get them from the chicken coop to whatever bed they were managing at the time with a chicken tractor on top, so they didn't run around and destroy all the rest of my garden. The issue was that I'd put tunnels across, like just wire tunnels that ran across the length of the yard, and then I trip over them or they'd escape. And next thing I know, I had like no garden and chicken dust bathing holes. So at the same time, I sort of realized that around the edge of the garden is this section that I can't reach basically, because I've got the rest of the bed all there and I have to crawl all the way in to get it. And at that point, I realized if I ran the tunnels around the edge of the garden, moving the garden beds in a bit and putting the entrance to the chicken tractor, which goes over the top of the bed, it's hard to describe. I probably shouldn't try to describe it. So there's a garden bed, there's a chicken tractor on top to keep them in, and then there's the tunnel that runs around the edge of the garden and leads back to the coop where they sleep at night. So basically they get themselves from the coop to the tractor, wherever they're digging a hole, digging their holes and stuff. And at the same time, they also keep the perimeter free of weeds. So I don't have to do the weeding around the edges anymore, which is good as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, I'm getting older.
You've got a wonderful video.
Oh yes, I do have a video of the chickens doing that, but by observing the way that, observing the fact that the chickens scratched everything up and realizing that I could combine, changing the way I sorted out I'd set up my garden so that it worked with the chickens and not, you know, with great tunnels running across the middle of the garden and me tripping over them with buckets of stuff. So fun.
I'm not going to give a garden example. The first thing that came into my head when we decided to do this panel was observing and interacting with the wildlife in the house, the kids. And so we've just got them a Spriggy card each, which is basically their own little Visa card that I put money on, and they can spend whatever they want anywhere, tap on. And so they're 12 and 14. And so we give them their pocket money on this Spriggy card, and it's a real eye-opener. Like, I'm not a tech ed, I used to be, but I'm not anymore. And my wife's sort of working, so I'm the one who has to manage all this. And it's kind of too much observing, because you can see exactly what they're doing with money. Like if you give them a $5 note, they might go down the corner shop for $1 worth of sweets, and you'd never know because it's just cash. Whereas on the Spriggy card, at like 7:30, my daughter leaves for school at 7:10 in the morning, and at 7:30 she's up the garage at the end of the road, spending $10 on something that I have no idea. And so it's kind of too much detail, if you like. And so I'm really holding myself back and telling myself to observe before you interact. And I was linking that into, and then you obtain a yield, because you are not destroying your relationship with your child by managing everything, every cent she spends, but you're going to get something back at the end of it if you can trust her and let her be. So yeah, it's an eye-opening learning curve that way.
Like the children are. For me, I'm a person who likes to sit and observe anyway. So usually when I start something new, I join a new group or whatever, I observe what people do, what sort of people they are. But back to the garden, because garden is a big part of my life. I grow a lot of food, I spend a lot of time there. I open it to the public, I run education. So when we moved in 2006, the garden was very much weedy, and that was at the end of several years of drought when we had water restrictions and everything, and some parts of the garden were just cracked clay. It looked like some photographs from, you know, deserts or whatever. So I didn't really know what to expect. And another thing is, I didn't really do gardening in Australia. I was in few rentals before, so I planted a few edibles, but I had no idea, and I never gardened on heavy clay. And that's what my garden is. It's several meters of brick quality clay over shade. and very little topsoil. So I worked out all this, and in the process of walking through the garden and cutting the weeds to see what is happening, because over half of the garden, about 600 square meters, that was just weedy lawn, about knee high in certain moments. So I found several interesting things just by observing. And that was first, I found area in the garden which had about 3 times as much topsoil as the rest of the garden. And then I found out in, I think 1949, there was an aerial survey of Sydney done. Obviously, photographs from that time are not very precise, but I could see that there was some fenced areas. So I assume that was probably a veggie garden in this spot. And it's really sheltered from the winds because of the trees and fences. And it's got a lot of sunlight. So, okay, that became my veggie garden. Another thing I discovered, and that probably falls into garden archaeology stuff, I found a lot of sandstone pavers or sort of stepping stones. So many of them in the garden, I was able to make steps to the shed and some other steps in the garden. So there were, because it's an old garden, the house was built in 1938. So there were quite a few owners since then. One of them has built a woodshed, which was rotting wood covered with corrugated iron. So I repurposed the iron, the sheets of iron, and I used them to line a new chicken house inside. So I've actually found a lot of materials on site which I could reuse and recycle, use them in some other way. Lengths of wood, it was like a hardwood, looked like parts of an old fence. So probably, you know, hardwood could last for a very long time. So that's the things I found in the garden by observing it. And then of course I had to observe the things like shade and sun, because the garden is actually very good location because it's on a hill which is exposed towards northeast. So that's a very good aspect for growing things. But also I have like the wind funnel between my house and the neighbor's house. So cold winds in winter from south and southeast, they enter this funnel and they actually bend plants. So I've got bendy trees growing through this area of the garden. So it helped me to plan what to plant and what not to plant in this area. So yeah, a lot of interesting things to be found in old gardens, and that's what my garden is. I found really old, big nails, like, you know, this size in trees for some reason, embedded in wood. So yeah, garden archaeology, observing. Did you find old stuff in your place too?
Yes.
Oh,
I found a hand there the other day, but anyway, I would definitely recommend observing, which I didn't really do. My main observation comes from mistakes that I've made, and you know, I do something and it doesn't work, and I think, oh, you know, I should have learned something from that, which I generally do. So, you know, I've bought trees and put them in the wrong place. I've put gardens in the wrong place. I've put paths in the wrong place. So just by finding out that they don't actually work, that's my observation of what I have to change to make things different. But I think the biggest thing that I've had to do is get rid of a bamboo forest that I had. And I actually loved it. It's, you know, I do like bamboo, but it's a running bamboo. And once I got rid of all the privets and so on, the bamboo really took off. And it was, I don't know, 14, 18 feet high, just really, really high and very beautiful, soft and green and, you know, useful things for all sorts of things. And unfortunately, it was in the only place where I have sun in the winter, the only place. So in the end, I had to bow to that situation and get rid of it. And that's where my veggies are now, because like a lot of other people, I don't have any sun in about 90% of my yard during 6 months of the year, pretty much from mid-April to mid-September. So if I actually wanted to grow any veggies, that's what had to happen. But it took me a long time to come to grips with that. Yes, and my other thing that I had to observe and try and come to grips with is the animal life. So I spent many years.
Electrified fences.
Everything, I've tried everything, and now I've got the rainforest was for the animals, but that hasn't happened. And so I've actually met most of my fruit trees, and that's had advantages, but it has taken a long time of seeing that, you know, they're not actually out to get me. That's what I thought at one point, but I understand that that's not true. That they're doing their thing, and I just got to.
So there is no conspiracy.
Are there any questions from the audience on this particular subject? Something you want to clarify, something you don't understand, something that you're intrigued by or want to share? You're just stunned. Is there anybody on the Zoom who has a question? No? Okay, we'll just wrap up this session just by a few little points that our little singer Charlie McGee makes, that is learning to see. A lot of people, you know, you look at stuff, but you don't know what you're looking at. It's a lot about stopping and looking and like, what am I seeing here? What am I looking at? Am I looking at just a bunch of insects around a plant, or am I looking at interactions between insects? One of the things I learned this year was about pollinators in my garden, because I did the science, it's called citizen science project that was looking at pollinators in your garden, and you had to go and stare at
The pollinators count?
pollinator count. You had to go and stare at particular areas of flowers for 10 minutes, and it's amazing what you see when you just stay there and just look at one little area and give it all of your attention. And I also started to smell things I hadn't smelled before, and I started to figure out, like, there was a lot of more of the native bugs and bees on the more native plants, and they had a really strong honey smell that I hadn't noticed before, because I hadn't been standing there up close trying to find all the things. So it's all your senses. Use all your senses when you're out there, and that's what our Charlie says. Come to your senses. Okay, so we're moving on to catch and store energy. So this is about developing systems that collect resources when they're abundant, so we can use them in times of need. So I'll throw it over to you. Who wants to go first on this one?
Okay.
Resources.
Yeah, resource center. I'm a recycler, so I pick stuff by the curbside, obviously. But I've got two main systems to store and catch energy, and this is solar panels. And because I work from home, I set up the things which need a lot of electricity, so they work at the time when my solar panels produce most of electricity. I don't have the battery, so the current comes from the panels, goes through the house, and then goes to the network. So I always run my washing machine, my electric dehydrator, I bake, I run my dishwasher, everything usually around noon till 2, so when my panels are working. So this way I capture the solar energy, and probably many people here in this room and on Zoom, you would have solar panels too. But it's not just having the panels, it's also the way you use the energy they produce, which is important. Because if you use the energy when it's produced at the highest capacity, then you don't sell so much to the grid, and the grid does not pay much now. After what was, I think, at the heyday of solar panels, about 8 or 10 years ago, now the price of solar electricity produced by households, it's very low. And another thing I store, it's water, and I store it in many ways. Sort of standard way is having rainwater tanks, and I've got 10,000 liter capacity tanks. My garden is quite large, so I can afford the space. And the tanks are connected to the house, so they are connected to the laundry and to 2 toilets. and also the main tanks are connected to the tap through the garden. So I use this water, but I also have rainwater tanks very much at every bigger shed of the garden. So they are like freestanding rainwater tanks. The water just goes there, and I've got taps, and I connect them to a hose. The other way of storing water in the garden is mulching the water. Mulching the garden, which captures the water, so water stays in the soil. I said before, my garden is steep, is on a slope, so after heavy rains, you would expect that a lot of water rushes down, but it's not the case because of the way I set up sways, which is horizontal trenches. They capture water on its way down. I have a lot of mulch. The soil is now much better than just compacted clay, so it absorbs a lot of water too. So yes, storing water, storing sunlight, and the third thing I store is I make a lot of preserves. So if I have a large crop of something, or if I go foraging, like I went recently to forage for mushrooms, and before that for wild apples, and I had like 2 10-liter buckets of wild apples, which I preserved for later because I wouldn't be able to eat 2 buckets of apples. And I also preserve excess food which I cannot eat in one go, the things which I get from the garden. So they get fermented, they get dehydrated, they are converted into various gels and jams and whatever. So yeah, storing solar energy, water, and food, that's the main things I do in terms of capturing and storing energy.
So I don't just got all of them.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, everything that Margaret just said. But another way is like your resource centre. I collect all the old yogurt pots, ice cream tins, jars, you name it. Whilst they're there, keep them somewhere. I've always been a bit of a hoarder, or as my wife prefers to say, a tight house. And so, you just permaculture's given me a license to collect all these things because you know they're going to come in handy at some point in the future.
So you're a master recycler.
Exactly. There's loads of stuff out there. Council cleanups, you just got to keep your eyes open, and while it's abundant, go get it. I go around and just drive around the streets at council cleanup to get plant pots. You just get hundreds and hundreds of plant pots, but when you're giving stuff away, they come in really handy. So I don't worry about people giving me back or cleaning them or whatever. You just say, yeah, keep it. And you can put the energy out there, in your community, build a bit of community by just being able to give stuff away, because it's not, you collected it when it was abundant and now you can share the love. I've generally put in things in like screws, nuts. When I'm doing a job around the house, it's easy to access them we did the drip line at the weekend. So there's 3 different fittings, an elbow, a T, and the little clasp that keeps the pipe on the elbow or T. And so you can fill each yogurt pot with each one. So they're not all mixed up together. You can just easily pick them out and carry the tubs around with you easily.
And because he had 2 different groups working on it, we could split all the stuff up and just like yogurt pots full of stuff and just off to our other bits of garden. Just the right size for the amount of stuff as well. You go next.
Okay, well, I mean, I do those things too, but I guess, let's see, as far as capturing energy for later use, I collect autumn leaves in autumn when they're in abundance, and store them in cages for hot compost later on. And same with greenery, if I find someone's chopped down a tree or something, I can go around there and get bags full of greenery and store that, because it's still nitrogenous even though it's brown later on. Yeah, I get coffee grounds from coffee shops, all that sort of thing. So yeah, generally scrounging.
Wonderful compost.
Yeah.
No larger scavenging. Yeah, I do pretty much the same thing. I've actually got currently 3 neighbours who are supplying me with lawn clippings. So one of them was mowing his lawn just this afternoon when I left to come to this meeting, and I sort of rolled my green bin over and just sort of touched on his version and said, can you just pop the lawn clippings in there, and then you can just roll it back onto my property. Don't worry about putting it away, it's all good. Yeah, but there's a couple of them that are sort of no to contact me now, and I give it to the chickens. So that's, instead of going, I mean, these days it goes to council, and council just, puts it all into a big green compost kind of thing, we hope. But yeah, so this is like an easy source of nitrogen that's been growing in someone else's lawn. No one's really had to put the energy into it until they had to mow it, and I get the mowings. So, yeah.
Just one thing about that. If someone's using some kind of chemicals on their, they might be using Roundup to kill their weeds.
Yeah.
Because I had a situation where someone was offering me lawn clippings from 2 different areas, and one I knew was sprayed, and one wasn't. I said, I don't want those. Because I imagine that's not going to be good stuff.
No, well, that's the bit where you actually check with them beforehand. So like I said, you do actually
Interact
talk
and
them.
observe.
Yes. Talk to the man ahead of time as well. So, yeah.
I've noticed one of the things we haven't mentioned is seeds. I mean, that seeds are exactly what a plant does. Stores up all the energy, puts it into the fruit and into the seeds, for then later on growing when the conditions are right. And our own storing seeds, catching seeds, and things, that's part of that whole catch and store energy as well.
By the way, the seed saving meeting is on in Willoughby. This for the next, I think the next one.
Getting
there early. We went to the last one in Mount Collie. It was lots of fun. Just sitting around chatting. I think there was quite a few people who were here. A couple of people who were here who enjoyed that. And yeah, so it's just good to sit around and talk, chat, spend the afternoon, and prepare seeds ready for storage and planting for the next year.
Are there any questions or comments from anybody on the catch and store energy? No one on the Zoom list? They all gone to sleep on Zoom?
It's hard to tell. They've got on their names shown.
All right, we'll go on to obtain a yield. Pretty obvious one mostly, I think. So this is about ensuring you're getting a truly useful reward as part of the work you do. It's not just about being in your garden and getting a yield in your garden. Who wants to start on?
Might just say, Tom, is that a question?
Is it me or?
I'm just wondering, did you have a question? I just saw you came off mute.
Yeah, I did. Actually, regarding energy, storing energy, as I spoke to Steph and Mike yesterday, we're getting an idea of what water tanks we're going to put in. So the big question in my mind is, do we find that investment for storing water is actually giving us good return, thinking of how cheap the water rate is? What the company come to quote to me today, actually saying something like rainwater is better than the tap water. That's what you're actually investing for. Is that something you find from your experience of using water tanks for years?
Did you hear that question? So the question was, in terms of the cost of getting a water tank, do you find a reasonable return on investment? Because water tanks can be fairly expensive to put in. Tap water prices are much high, and the people quoting putting the tank in said, well, the rainwater is so much better than tap water, that's part of the investment. So what are your thoughts on the return on investment in using water tanks?
I think personally, I mean, I got stainless steel tanks, which of all the water tanks are the most expensive, but I did it because they're recyclable for the life of the product, and there's no plastic in it whatsoever, so there's no BPAs. But I didn't do it because of the like the water quality or anything. I did it for my own peace of mind that I can, so I want to store energy. If I couldn't afford it, I wouldn't have done it, but it's an ethical thing with permaculture. There's quite a lot of examples that have been given with other things. The artist's family broke his camera on a trip, and he went into a shop and they said, it's going to cost a fortune to repair this, you might as well get a new camera. And he said, no, but I like this camera. I'll pay the money, just repair it. It's about that. If you buy a new one, you're destroying the planet. The current one works perfectly fine. It's more of an ethical thing rather than a quality or a return on investment. I'm not after making money out of my water. I just want to do the right thing because I can. There's plenty of people who are in a position they can, and I'm trying to offset that a bit.
I just like that. I can't, well, I'm not going to put in water tanks into a property that I might have to leave in the next round, but I have a broken pipe that rather than getting the landlord to get it fixed, we just put a whole bunch of larger, I've got a small water tank that's under one broken one and a couple of tubs, and I use that to top up my pond because I don't want to use chlorinated water. I need rainwater, so I use that to top up my pond, and if I've got excess, then I water straight from those. I've got a tank right near one of my little lemon trees. It's just a little, in fact, one of them's just a large garbage bin, so I can water one of my lemon trees whenever I go down to my shed straight out of that tank. It's quicker and easier than getting my hose from the top of the garden. So there's other ways to save that energy. I save me having to walk up to the top to get more water and then walk back down to the garden to water my get my little jug out of one thing and just tip it. So that's saving energy. What's the way to think of it?
For me, as I said, I've got two large rainwater tanks, so 2 tanks, 5,000 liters each, and about 45 meters of piping which goes to the tanks from the roof of the house, because the tanks are pretty far. So it's not really worth the money if you are just thinking about return on investment. But for me, it was ethical issue, like Mike said, and also for me, it's independence. It's having my own water in case things go haywire. And I've been to martial law in Poland, and I've got different attitudes to the government and relying on government. So I prefer to have independent water source, and I actually use rainwater to cook and to drink. So I boil it first, but we use rainwater because I reckon there is less chemicals in rainwater. There was research done by Michael Mobbs from Sustainable House. He's placed in Chippendale, so there is much more pollution in this area. And still, when he did research, the quality of his rainwater was better than the quality of tap water. So for me, it's an ethical issue, it's independence, and it's having good quality water. So that's the thing which are important for me. Obviously, if you can't afford, as Mike said, you don't put rainwater system because it's not worth the money. But if you can, then go for it because there are some other reasons behind it.
And another thing that came up in my PDC was you're spending all your time trying to feed the soil and build up bacteria in the soil, and tap water's got chlorine in it, so you're killing as much as you're creating. So the more you can use rainwater, the better.
So Margaret, when you say you use your rainwater for cooking, do you filter them or you just boil them?
No, I don't filter, I just boil water. And I'm still alive. After nearly 15 years of doing that.
She's secretly our resident zombie, actually.
Margaret, how many liters you've got? Sorry, I didn't hear the figure.
In altogether,
Yeah,
have, or how many I use?
How many liters altogether of the water tank? Because my backyard.
Okay. The main rainwater tank which are connected to the house, that's 10,000 liters, and this water goes to the toilets and to the laundry taps and the washing machine. So I use rainwater to wash my clothes too.
Yeah.
And then I also have 2,500 next to a large shed and over 2,000 liters next to the wood shed. So it's about 14 and a bit. Plus I use about 250 liters barrel I've got this little metal roof at the back of the house, above the kitchen door. So this water goes into the barrel when it rains from this roof. So basically, except for one metal shed where I don't have the space to put the rainwater tank, very much every roof in a garden would have a rainwater tank attached to it. And some of the tanks are freestanding, so it's only the big ones which are connected to tap system and to the house. And the others I can just hook up a hose or use water, put in watering can. And sometimes I use them to top up the bigger tanks. So about 14,500 liters.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I'm not feeling. I was just wondering how do you arrange the fittings and stuff? I mean, do you get a plumber in to do it, or do you have to get a specialist to come and fit a rainwater tank?
So how did you do the fittings? Did you get a plumber to come in and do it?
I actually had a company which put the water tanks. I had an idea how to get water to the tanks. The way it works, my house is below the garden, but I didn't have any place to put the tanks near the house. So I put the tanks at the end of the garden, about 8 meters above the house. So the way it worked, I had to have a plumber because what I did, near the house wall, the gutters empty into a large barrel, about I think 300 liters, and I have a very strong pump in this barrel. And this pump pumps water to the higher tanks. And I also decided to disconnect part of the house from the city mains water, which means my toilets can be only connected to rainwater tank and my laundry too. So I don't have any switch between city water and rainwater. So if I run out of rainwater, I would need, you could install it in such a way that you can just switch to the city water, which is pretty costly. But yeah, I did have plumbers basically to cut off part of the house from city water and connect to rainwater.
Okay.
So you actually have to use plumbers if it's the water which is going to be used for drinking and machinery like say a washing machine. It's illegal to connect this stuff yourself.
Thank you for that.
Just don't tell anyone.
We need to move on to the last session now. So the last one is obtain a yield. How do you ensure you're getting truly useful rewards as part of the work you do? Who went first last time? Stephanie, you can go first. Or you can all, do you want to all ponder that question for a moment?
I've got an answer.
You go then.
I have a number of fruit trees on my land, and the first year they were in, then they grew a little bit, and then I got a few flowers and I got some fruit, and then the fruit flies got it. So the next year I bagged them with like little mesh bags, and the fruit flies got them again. And I hung the fruit fly traps and I tried to bag whole branches, and it didn't work. And the only thing that I found that works is netting the entire tree. It is a bit of effort for getting a yield, but every year when I post my photos of my fruit trees, nectarines, peaches,
you get me begging.
Margaret is like, woo, woo, woo.
Peaches.
So yeah, it's to obtain a yield, you do sometimes have to do more than you might. The other thing is, I think, like the water tanks and convenience, a lot of times it's easier to do the non-permaculture thing. It is easier to just spray your fruit trees the way that commercial businesses do, and do with it that way. But I made the choice that I didn't want to spray my trees with whatever it is that they spray them with, and I actually want to get a yield from my fruit trees, so that was the extra effort that I did. And certainly, growing my own fruit with the capture and store energy. I also bottle them and everything like that, and then I have peaches all year round if my sister doesn't need them. First, I discovered there's like an inch left in my jar. So I left you some. It's like you ate the rest of it. Is that an interactive? Integrated pest management. So
Give feedback, I think it's.
stop eating my peaches. Yeah, but in order to obtain a yield, then I've had to, net the fruit trees. But I have got some nice apples this year and some pretty good fruit throughout the rest of the year. So yeah, in order to obtain a yield, sometimes you do have to take that extra step of doing it. And the other, yeah.
So you have to prune the trees a lot?
I do have to prune the trees, but the other thing is they're dwarf trees, so they're not supposed to grow more than, 3 or 4 meters. So, but yeah, they do need to be pruned, but the other thing is pruning is also good for them because it sort of, condenses the energy rather than getting spindly and all over the place. Yeah, but these days when someone on my Facebook groups, garden groups, someone's like, how do I lost this to, I lost my thing to fruit fly. How do I stop the fruit fly? And it was like, hang traps and use the thingy bags. I'm like, net the entire tree. Like, isn't that a bit of, pest Nazi? It's like, yes, it is. But nature is abundant, but that abundance doesn't necessarily come to us. We put the work in, we are going to have to do something extra to stop it. And in the coming year, I'm probably going to have to fight the possums because
They found your garden.
they found my garden. I did manage to keep the cockatoos at bay. The cockatoos haven't discovered it. They went for the neighbour's orange tree instead because he didn't net his.
I'll expand on that. Like if you're growing fruit trees, mine are only 6 months old at the moment, and you're supposed to pull all the fruit off for the first 3 years, so you don't actually get anything. But to obtain a yield, put pumpkins and all sorts of annual stuff underneath, and use the structure of the fruit tree as a trellis for nasturtiums and all sorts of other things that can grow up, like sweet potatoes. So you can obtain a yield by planting, be specific with your planting and get other fruit and veg out of the garden while you're waiting for your main fruit to come through. Same with your veggies as well. If you're planting long, like garlic takes ages to grow, try and interplant it with other things that give you something from that patch of ground whilst your garlic's maturing. Don't just sit there and use all your garden on garlic and have nothing.
I come from the tradition of growing food gardens. So my parents always had this backyard which was full of veggies and fruit trees, and the front garden where my mom used to plant beautiful flowers. So nobody would know what was in the back. No, everyone very much did the same. So for me, the whole purpose of having a garden is to grow food. So the main thing when I have a garden is to obtain a yield. And I try to go for large amount, especially starchy stuff, because it's, it's nice to have tomatoes and raspberries and apples, but what about the base of your dinner, which is, you have potatoes, sweet potatoes, yacon, Queensland arrowroot, Jerusalem artichoke, and all the rooty stuff like beetroots, carrots. So I grow a lot of these, and I preserve them to have them out of the season. So for me, it's more like, okay, how many tens of kilograms of this stuff I can grow? Plus I have about 30 fruit trees. And well, across the valley, about 300 meters from me, I've got park with residential 300 cockatoos and corellas. So yes, I have to net my trees because of the parrots. Every time any citrus trees are coming into color, I have to net them, the same with fig trees. And yes, I do have possums too. But yeah, obtaining a yield, like physical yield of fruit and veg, it's the main thing which I plan to have when I've got a garden. And then of course I've got some other yield. I have grown mussels, up and down, carting stuff, pushing, digging, lifting, preserving, lifting all the jars with preserves. So it's good for your health. That's another type of yield, which maybe it's not very visible. It's mental health as well. Gardens are important for that. And not many people are aware there is a bacteria in the soil, which when it gets into our bloodstream through, through little cuts on our hands or whatever, and inhaling, this bacteria actually combat depression. So it's not just being in a garden and looking at beautiful flowers and butterflies, which helps with your mental problems, especially if you are depressed. It's actually a bacteria. So, you know, gardens heal, gardens feed us, heal us. So yeah, that's the yield I'm after.
Maybe call it that.
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think the main yield for me would be the satisfaction. No, it's the satisfaction I get from the whole thing. You know, it's just, I mean, I probably don't get a huge amount of yield in the way of fruit and veggies and that sort of thing, but there's a huge amount of satisfaction in actually being able to grow something of your own. If you want something, you know, to, I don't know, parsley, herb, something like that, just go and get it, and you've grown it, and it's almost still living when you actually eat it, and there's just the satisfaction of doing stuff for yourself and actually using what's around you, and communicating with, you know, other people who feel the same way, and sharing things with other people. You know, I think that's pretty good. I mean, really, for me, the physical yield is pretty minimal. But you know, there are all those wonderful things that you get from, you know, being involved with. And I just think that when you look at the universality of all the principles, there's a huge amount of yield from actually putting those into practice, because they can operate in every area of your life and in every part of the world. It's just a big yield from that point of view. Yeah.
One of the things I like is to think about, like, not what I should grow, is gets to what I actually enjoy growing. What's easy that I don't have to put a lot of effort into. So cherry tomatoes are ruling my garden right now. Every time I plant anything, 5 cherry tomatoes come up around it. It's unbelievable. But I love them. And I also love my female bowerbird that comes in and steals them, but only from one area. She always goes to the same patch, so that's hers. So I have a yield for the joy of the bowerbird, and I have a yield for me. But there's also other things, like when you have a yield and you can swap your yield with other people, that's so great. My dad started growing stuff in his garden, and you just get so much joy about, do you need lettuce? And I just tell him I do, because it's like, yeah, I need lettuce. You can have one of my cucumbers, because he just loves the fact that he can not only feed himself, but he can. It's an excuse to come and have a cup of tea. I need to take cat lettuce because she won't have enough.
The yield is also in the swapping. It's also social interaction, and meeting people and getting to talk to people. And those of us who've done crop swap know that you make connections with people that are nearby and you can swap with regularly for things, and it becomes part of a community. So the yield is not just physical, there's a lot of intangible yields as well that we benefit from as permaculturists, and the things that we,
Yeah, last year I had the most ridiculous choco vines that just came up just after, you know, that big rain after the drought. And I think a couple of them were on my side, but most of them I think came over from my neighbour's fence, and they were just took over everything, grew over everything, and I had over 200 chocos. Wow. But from that, I had loads of people who were totally into it. I had people coming and taking 10 chocos at a time, and these were monster chocos too. And I was getting things like, they were like, oh, I don't have anything in my garden, can I make you something? So I had somebody who made the most amazing peanut brittle. I think she came back 3 times. She gave away one lot and said, oh, I've given away a lot. Do you mind if I come back and get some more? I can bring you more peanut brittle. And I'm like, oh, more yield. So yeah, there's a lot of things in yield that we can all get. Are there any questions or more comments or stories on the yield side of things?
Just have a question on the time of living for fertilizers and animals to exclude from the fruit. My observation has been something bottom we have a flat top type bedding, and the birds decided an easy way to get through that was to dive bomb. And so they systematically dive bomb until the net slowly sank down to
so smart.
for the net. So how do you actually counter that?
That sounds like birds observing. They're getting the principles.
Well, I guess the local cockatoos are not that smart. And I also put a structure like a frame above the trees, and I spread the net on it, so, and it's attached with strong clips. So even if they would dive bomb, they would probably bounce back, hopefully. But I do have like very much, most of Sydney is in the area of fruit fly, and fruit fly is reached Queens in Victoria. It's Queensland fruit fly, but it's got acclimatized to colder climates. It's not just climate change, it's actually started to appear in colder areas. So I went to a seminar on fruit flies, and the only way it works is if you are 10 kilometers from, at least 10 kilometers from the nearest veggie garden or orchard, so which obviously doesn't work. So for example, this year I decided to grow large tomatoes. And as you know, large tomatoes don't grow in Sydney because fruit flies always get them. And I religiously bag them individually. I've got like 60 bags. At one stage, I had 60 bags on my 10 tomato shrubs. And I had, I don't know, about 12 kilograms of the most wonderful heirloom tomatoes. But yes, it's like you netting your trees. I was just netting tomatoes. And I've got them. The fruit flies didn't get them. So, you know, it's I've got problem with possums. And but my biggest problem are rats, especially after the house next door was demolished. And I guess they have moved into my garden. So I would need a large snake or a few snakes. Maybe not the biggest snakes like the pythons, because they would go after chicken eggs. I also have chickens. But yes, rats are the main problem, and they are very much, there is nothing I can do about them. I don't want to poison them because I've got powerful owls and boo-books hunting in my garden. And also lizards get poisoned because they eat the poison too. So I have poison rats. I usually trap them and drown them, but there are too many of them. I've spoken to a vet who specializes in small animals like rabbits and rats, and he said all what gardeners do, they are select for the smartest, because rats have a hierarchy. So usually they send the youngest ones or the biggest one to try. Like if they see new food source inside a trap. And so the youngest and the stupid ones, they are the ones which we kill. The smart are the ones which stay and then they multiply. So yeah, so it's really tough with rats.
How to get a yield of rats.
Yeah, I know, they are not really edible.
I have a really good yield of snails. Does anybody want to start a
Oh, my
some kind of
chickens love
snail?
them.
Do they really?
Yeah, my chickens like them, but also you could get with someone who keeps ducks.
You get blue tongue lizards.
I
And
don't
then
have
blue
enough.
tongue lizards.
I have, but they're
Okay.
just not enough for the next snails I've got.
I don't have blue tongue lizards, but I keep on trying. I don't try to step on them, but I turn the corner and next thing I know, there's a blue tongue lizard and I'm carrying something. It's like, oh my gosh, avoid, avoid. I found with the fruit flies, the netting, I do the frame over the tree as well. And with the fruit flies, I found there's two types of netting. There's sort of a loopy kind of netting where it's like a knit and it stretches, flexes in both ways. And then there's like a woven netting. And I used the knit netting a couple of like last year, and that was pretty good. This year I used the woven netting. It kept the fruit flies out, but the possums basically just bit holes through the netting. So because it's weed, it just pulls down, but it doesn't spring back. So towards the end of it, there was possums eating the fruit. There were fruit flies getting in through the holes. So I probably won't be using that netting on the soft fruit anyway, because it was too easy for the possums to just go.
On the smart netting story, I found possums sucked the plums out of the bags.
I was
Right, and you go, there's a mush plus a seed, they grow with goodness.
I did find that they did sort of suck that out. Because my tree is large enough, not all the fruit is on the outside, a lot of the fruit is on the inside, and I make sure like cut out, I trimmed out enough of the inside so that there was a decent airflow. I still had some fruit that went moldy, like I think we just had a really humid summer, and the airflow through the middle of the one was good. So, you know, the donut peak was not as great as usual, and the airflows. But, you know, we live and learn.
But the ones you had were really nice.
The ones that I had were very nice.
Margaret, I recommend a fox terrier for your rats.
Sorry, what?
The fox terrier.
I keep rabbits and chickens. Fox terriers are not really good with small animals. So that would be carnage. Unless someone would outsource and I can lock up my chickens and rabbits and let the fox terrier go to the garden for a day or two. But they also like to dig. They are dogs bred to hunt foxes. So they've got a reflex to dig and to chase. So if you have chickens and
rats, they rats.
Yeah, they are ratters, but they were mostly developed for foxes. But you know, they just chase anything and they dig holes too.
We got a dog last year, a year ago, and he's caught 4 rats so far, versus my 0 using endless different traps. And obviously that was the dumb ones that are fermenting for. Although he did get to 1 chicken, so you know, we've got lots of fencing in place now to try and mitigate that.
But the other thing is also rats sometimes get deterred by the smell of a dog. So if I could get in touch with one of my neighbors and collect dog poop, and just put it around my gate.
I was going to say, you need to choose. Honestly, I could put a bucket by my gate and it would be full of dog poop by the end of the day.
Yeah, I probably could do the same because my street goes to an off-leash park.
Margaret, I can help.
Okay, on that note, yield of dog poo, it's getting pretty late and we're going to have to wrap up. So if there's any more final desperate things that you need to get across apart from yielding dog poo, can I continue on the topic of poo? Okay, another advice given me by a vet is possums don't like the smell of dogs. So if you have access to dog hair, you can hang it in nets around the garden and it gets wet. It still stinks of a dog, so they don't like that.
It doesn't hurt.
Okay.
I've got them strung around my passion fruit and on the fence. No,
Was it possums or rats? Rats are smarter than
no,
possums.
it's just possums that go around.
And what also deters rats, supposedly, it's a big snake pool.
Snake poop.
Yes. Yeah.
All volunteers to harvest snake.
Well, you
Alternatively,
could
volunteers to keep snakes.
I've heard, but I don't know if it's right, if that male urine deters rats. Is that true? Does anybody know?
I don't know.
Volunteers to test that.
Yeah, you
The
can
other one
come
we
and
have, Cecilia suggested trying blood and bone to deter
yeah.
possums. Warning though, if you've got dogs, it actually attracts your dogs to dig in that area.
I've heard you have to renew that as well if it rains, it sort of loses its
Potency.
potency. You have to
And
keep
another thing
replacing.
is, not everywhere you can put blood and bone because some plants don't need too much nitrogen. So if you grow root crops, you cannot put blood and bone too much because you get nice greenery and very small roots. So that's another thing. It's a fertilizer.
Does anyone get a problem of turkeys stealing the chicken eggs? Bush turkeys? No.
No.
Yeah, but bush turkey coming to steal my chicken eggs.
But have you got like large door to the chicken coop? Because my chickens have chicken door.
Yes,
And
chicken
there is
door
also-
they could fit in.
Oh, all right. That's not good.
Okay, I am going to wrap up. You can all continue within the hall, but it is after 8:30 now, so it's time to go home and get a yield of sleep.
Dinner.
Get a yield of food. Okay, thanks all for coming. Thank you to the panelists. Big round of applause. Everyone on Zoom. Right.
I actually brought my dinner with me.
Did you?
Because the last thing.
Okay, edible garden trail hosts, actually it's Margaret, you, me. Any other?
No, I'm not host. Do you want to get PSN stuff out to all garden hosts?
Yeah, most of the PSN, I think they want to. I don't on anyone who's not PSN.
And what I will like is quite a few people that are not regular members of PSN.
Like Laurie is.
Most garden hosts will be PSN stuff out.
Well, I can email that flyer out and just have to print.
Yeah.
The one I'm thinking of is
Some of
like
them.
their little, I'll show you.